Joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust ran a pretty successful operation since they learned to trust each other. However, as soon as Riley turns 13, 4 new emotions come along, led by anxiety who wants to take over. Hey everyone, this is Luke Ripa, and I'm going to review Inside Out 2, the sequel to the 2015 Pixar cult classic right here on Wikos. Before I talk about the movie, be sure to subscribe or follow depending on what platform you are watching this on. This way you won't miss any of our reviews and content. You can find Wikos on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, and Twitch. I have to confess something. While I enjoyed watching it, I was never really much of a fan of Inside Out. That's not a problem, as I was 22, so I was way off age target either way. Too old to appreciate it as a youngster, too young to appreciate it as a parent. However, I generally can appreciate such movies. I really enjoyed Turning Red, The Good Dinosaur, Lightyear, and, for obvious reasons, Luca. But not Inside Out, and it's not because of the technical quality or the looks, all of which lived up to the Pixar standards. It's because of the narrative, which to me was and still can be easily misinterpreted by the kids watching it. You might point out it's a metaphor, to which I would kindly answer, no shit, Sherlock. But that's also exactly the problem. We recognize it's a metaphor, we recognize it's a tale about learning how to deal with emotions, and we are able to do that because we have the tools to read and interpret the narrative correctly, whereas kids more often than not enjoy the story for what it is on the surface, requiring adults for guidance if they want to go deeper. But if a movie like Zootopia had a very funny and effective story even disregarding the deeper meaning, Inside Out literally had emotions basically controlling Riley, an 11-year-old girl. In other words, the movie to work on youngsters heavily relied on parental guidance, otherwise taking the story literally, something kids do, could lead to questionable actions. To be fair, new age educators that live by the mantra "let your kids express their emotions" even when they are punching their kindergarten mates because of anger seem to have taken the movie literally as well, but I digress. You do you, Linda. Anyways, the problem does carry over in Inside Out 2 with the fact that now it's aimed more at early teens, so in a way it's less of a problem, at least in these terms. What remains an issue is having Riley being a protagonist that is not a protagonist because it's two of her emotions. In the first movie were joy and sadness, this time around are joy and anxiety. Even here, in fact, what actually happens to Riley, it's very little. Sure, it's part of the concept that emotions kick in even at little things, and that of course what seems small to us to a girl her age it's actually an almost traumatizing change. Also, what Riley has to go through admittedly is very relatable, no matter the kid's gender. For obvious reasons, this is definitely a quality. Yet when you look at the movie in its entirety, in the sense from above so to speak, when you rationalize Riley's actual story you can't help but think, that's it? In other words, from that regard, it feels a little bit underwhelming. However, what Inside Out 2 does very smartly is to focus on anxiety and the metaphor that comes with it. For one, focusing on such an emotion makes the narrative more mature, hence increasing the story's age target even to those years between childhood, teenhood, and parenthood, which again is definitely a plus. But more importantly, makes the main story more interesting, as anxiety exists because the given situation's outcome could be any of the emotions we are able to feel, and generally, like the movie depicts, we tend to prepare ourselves with the worst case scenario to better deal with what we think is the more likely outcome. And yeah, that's literally the point of the movie and what happens if we lose control over it. In other words, I could say Inside Out 2 story is more relatable to me, now a 31-year-old, compared to Inside Out 1. However, that doesn't mean it's necessarily a better movie. Despite my reservations about Inside Out 1, I give the movie props that every emotion plays an important part even though joy and sadness are the protagonists. Here, anxiety and sadness are the protagonists, with the old 4 emotions being companions and the new ones being nothing but plot devices that justify how Joy's adventure gets resolved. Okay, I get it, all of the emotions are part of effective jokes, and to be fair, they are represented correctly, meaning ennui, embarrassment, and envy's designs are on point. But they literally have almost nothing to do with the plot, they are just there for a scene or again to provide a means to continue it, but have no real role, which is a pity and takes the film down a notch compared to its predecessor. Another downside of Inside Out 2 is that both Mindy Kaling and Bill Hader did not return to their roles as Disgust and Fear. They are minor characters, but their voice conferred them more personality than they transpire in here. Fortunately, Amy Poehler, Philly Smith, and Louis Black return as joy, sadness, and anger, and indeed they feel right at home. The best new entry is obviously Maya Hawke, who voices anxiety. She does an amazing job and confers the right personality to the character, feeling absolutely authentic. Eyo Edebiri, Paul Walter Hauser, and Adele Exarchopoulos voice Envy, Embarrassment, and Denui respectively. They all do a pretty nice job, but none are given the means to do more given the characters' writing. I want about technicalities, every Pixar movie is absolutely on point and astonishing, and here is no different. I limit myself to say that the animation differences were a really nice touch and felt very authentic. And yet, Fauci is amazing. I don't care if it's a Dora the Explorer's backpack ripoff, even because it obviously is and doesn't even try to hide it. Overall, I give Inside Out 2 a 8 out of 10. It's a really good movie and many will consider it a Pixar return to form, but some minor details on how the story evolves don't make it a masterpiece. That's it for this review. Did you watch Inside Out 2? Do you agree with my review? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, my name is Luca Ripa and I'll see you at the next video review.